Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, the Eagles have signed a potential new starting linebacker. We have our takeaways on that, plus grading the Eagles' non-in-house free agent signings. So Marcus Mariota, Rashaad Penny, all that and more on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Tuesday edition of the show. I'm Louis DiBiase, as always, joined by my co-host Gino Camilleri. You can find our podcast Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms. Gino, as I teased, we have a new signing to get into today, and we were joking about it before the show started. It's a new player, but it's at a position that they do the exact same thing. It feels like every single year. It's a 1-year inexpensive contract for a player that every time we ask the team that had him before, they always say he was good, not great, not terrible either. And it's at the linebacker position. The Philadelphia Eagles today agreed to a 1-year contract with former Bears linebacker Nicholas Morrow, who had 116 tackles last year and played in every defensive snap for Chicago. But at the same time, Gino, you talked to our guy, Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears, and he wasn't overly hype-worthy either for this signing.
He basically said that he's a good athlete. He's fast. He can cover a lot of space, but can he do it under control? Is he somebody that you're going to want to rely on in coverage? Is he somebody that's going to be a pure run stuffer? I don't know. He's a jack of many trades, it seems, and it seems that he's a master of none of them. But we're going to have to get back to that MO that the Eagles don't pay linebackers. And Nakobe Dean is more than likely going to be one of those starting two. And Nick Morrow, outside of Sean Bradley, seems to be the guy that is going to start opposite of Nakobe.
There's nobody
Dean
else
at this point in time. There quite literally is nobody else until they go in the draft. And it seems that they're probably going to at least have to add one more between the draft, between maybe a third wave of free agency. But Nick Morrow is one of those signings that probably won't even count towards the compensatory pick formula. I'm sure it's close to a veteran minimum type of deal. But Brad Spielberger, one of the guys from Over the Cap, made a great point that maybe this could be one of those signings that, hey, it's not the Kyzir White level, but you could turn around and potentially get a 7th round comp pick for the guy if he gets signed away next year, or you could keep him on the cheap. And I'm interested to see what they do. But Nick Morrow, it really fits what they want to do in terms of guys in their front seven and guys that will be able to cover as well, is that they have to be good athletes. And Lauren Cox from Locked On Bears said that if you were going to take anything away from Nicholas Morrow's game, it's that he does have the athleticism to play in the National Football League.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is a solid signing. Again, not somebody that I think has the upside of being one of the best linebackers in football. But at the same time, Gino, this isn't the Justin Evans signing yesterday. They bring in a former New Orleans Saints safety who I think it's obvious he's not going to be an option as a starter next year at that position. Whereas Morrow right now is, as you mentioned, the favorite to start next to Nakobe Dean. It's just, this is the same Howie Roseman signing he makes every year. Last year with Kyzir White, and it worked. Then you look in the past, it was the 1-year deal with Corey Nelson. If you don't remember him, it's because it did not work out. He was a starter for the Denver Broncos. Some people thought after that Super Bowl run, he could be your new, hidden gem that becomes a really good player. Didn't work out. They made the same move for LJ Fort. That didn't work out because the Eagles didn't give Fort an opportunity to play, and they cut him. He goes to Baltimore and has actually a really good year. You look at the Zach Brown signing in 2019, Eric Wilson in 2021. Gino, most of these moves have not worked, but it did work last year with Kyzir White. So here's to hoping that Morrow falls on the right side of history.
It really tells us two things, Lou. One, that they got extremely lucky hitting on TJ Edwards, keeping him in-house and developing him.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And the best year that maybe TJ had of his career was when he was paired with arguably the best linebacker in a duo that we can talk about going back to the early 2000s. I mean,
thank God, by the way, TJ worked out, because even the 3rd round pick they spent on Davian Taylor, that didn't work either.
No, it did not. And that's a great point that Kyzir White was almost brought in as a necessity, because you would have expected Davian Taylor to get this Nakobe Dean type of bump where there's nobody there. You're the young athlete that was drafted to fill this position. Well, good thing is Nakobe Dean actually produced at a high level and isn't much of a project as opposed to what Davian Taylor was.
Sure.
And I am right there with a lot of people now saying, like, let's just give Nakobe the keys, and what's the worst that's going to happen, right?
Looks
he
like
has his
that's what they're
worst
doing.
season in his career, and then he gets better from every year on going forward. And that's what you have to expect. And sometimes with these young linebackers, you got to just throw them into the fire and see if they can play. Look at Devin Bush for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Lou. He finds his way out of Pittsburgh. They spent 2 first-round picks on him. They moved up to go and get Devin Bush, but you have to find out if these linebackers can play. You're either a guy that could cover ground, come down and stop the run, which Nakobe Dean looked like he could do last year, and now with an expanded role, man, is this guy going to average 10-plus tackles a game
We'll
at
find
this point
out.
in time?
Hammer the over most weeks. I feel like next year, Gino and LOE3, the over on Nakobe Dean tackles is going to be a popular
one. They lose
one.
their top 5 guys, though, Lou. You would have to expect that he would. And unless you expect Morrow to double it up and go 100-plus in back-to-back seasons, Nakobe Dean seems to be that guy.
Well, and you made the interesting point. I mean, I just talked about all the linebackers they missed on. They almost kind of got saved by this undrafted rookie in TJ Edwards turning into a stud. This time around, they're probably going to get saved by Nakobe Dean, a day 1 talent falling to the 3rd round because of phantom injury concerns. And now he's completely healthy. So, they're probably going to get lucky at this position again. And I think linebacker, I saw an interesting poll today by a fan. Wish I could credit him. Can't remember the name, but he put up a poll, and it was, what position does Howie Roseman prioritize or value the least? And it was safety, running back, and linebacker. I think by far it's linebacker because, they don't invest a lot in running back or safety, but at least a running back, you can say you spent a 2nd-round pick on Miles Sanders and traded a 4th for Jay Ajayi. And you can say that, at safety, he paid Rodney McLeod multiple times. He traded for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. He offered an extension to Chauncey. Last year, he wanted to pay Marcus Williams. At linebacker, the most that he's invested in this position since he took over again in 2016, a 3rd-round pick for Davian Taylor and Nakobe Dean? Outside of that, it's been, again, these 1-year prove-it rental deals.
They didn't pay Jordan Hicks when they had the opportunity to.
They didn't pay anybody.
The biggest move that they made at that position came under Chip Kelly when they moved LaShawn McCoy for Kiko.
Chip wouldn't stop. They had D'Amico Ryans and Michael Kendricks. He trades for Kiko, then drafts Jordan Hicks in the 3rd round. Chip was the complete bizarro Howie Roseman at this position.
100%. And now you're sitting there looking at the linebacker position once again, Lou, and you have to think back to that Super Bowl year. Do you remember that Donnell Ellerbe, somebody that they signed late in the season, was taking middle linebacker
it's gonna be a great
for them in the Super Bowl?
Like 10 years down the road.
Absolutely. And that's the biggest onus, I would say, of anything that Howie Roseman could do, that in the biggest moment, in the biggest game, what was the one position that they prioritized the absolute least? And you have to look at it and say it was linebacker. And outside of a single season where you got TJ Edwards and Kyzir White to play very, very good football, that's been a position that you have won games in spite of. And hopefully, fingers crossed, you get lucky with Nakobe Dean. Nick Morrow is an athlete, at least can run. Hopefully he could continue to tackle. Eric Wilson comes here. That guy just didn't seem interested at all in coming downhill and tackling.
Yeah.
If you want to be a linebacker in Philadelphia, there's 2 things that you need. Actually 3, I would say. You need athleticism to cover sideline to sideline. I think you need to have that want to come down and clean up the spill, because that's what the defensive linemen are going to do. And you have to be good enough in coverage to be a linebacker, because TJ was never premier at coverage. Even last year, he was just okay. But they will get by as long as you could clean up the mess from that defensive line, because everything goes from the defensive line, then the secondary, and the linebackers, they just get whatever's left over at the end of the day.
Absolutely. But Howie Roseman continues to add talent outside of the organization, Gino. That's what I want to get into coming up next. We've really dove into all the grades and our, thoughts on the re-signings of veterans like Jason Kelsey, Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Darius Slay, and James Bradbury. But what about the signings Howie has made outside of the organization. Our thoughts on those, including Nicholas Morrow, the new linebacker for the Philadelphia Eagles, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. And guys, today's show is sponsored by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. The tournament is heating up, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back. If your first bet doesn't win, just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. You can bet on the tournament, the NBA playoffs coming up, the NHL playoffs as well, NFL futures, all that and more at FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, NFL, and now the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, Eagles fans, we are continuing on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. We talked about the Eagles' new signing of linebacker Nicholas Morrow, who was a 17-game starter for the Chicago Bears last year, Gino, and that's just another signing Howie has made outside of the organization. You saw yesterday he brings in New Orleans Saints safety Justin Evans for some depth, signed Greedy Williams last week, the Cleveland Browns former second-round pick, cornerback for Cleveland. You look at Marcus Mariota comes in to back up Jalen Hurts. He signed Rashaad Penny a few weeks ago as well. What are your overall thoughts on the moves Howie has made outside of, running it back? And the most important, we said it all offseason after the Super Bowl, the most important moves were going to come inside the NovaCare complex and then the draft as well. But I feel like these moves have been pretty solid as well that he's made outside of the team.
If there's one way to describe it, I'm going to take everybody through a virtual tour of a store right here, right? Let's say it's a big box store that rhymes with Schmall Schmart, all right? You walk into Schmall Schmart and you take a big long walk from the beginning of the store. You walk all the way to the electronics aisle, right? And you walk past the PlayStations, the Xboxes. And then there's this section of DVDs. And there's the brand new ones that are out on Blu-ray, right? And they're all stacked nicely. And there's 5, 6, 7 of those in a bundle. And then you look over, and just in the middle of the aisle is this ball pit-esque looking thing that is consumed by thousands of random DVDs. And you're going to look through that thing and say, what is this, Scary Movie 12? No, I've never even heard of this movie. And then you're going to pick it up and say, oh, Saving Private Ryan, like my favorite movie. I'm going to buy this for $1.50. That's what that's been. They have gone to this DVD bin and said, we are going to try and find value.
That's exactly what they did.
We have to try and find something good in this mishmash of what is free agency, what is guys that are looking to cash in. Not this year. They're trying to get that 1-year deal, maybe go on and get a bigger deal next year. That's what it seems to be. They went into that bargain bin and are hoping that they open up some of those DVDs and that they got away with a winner. And maybe they walk out and, hey, it was an empty case and there's nothing really in there. Yeah. And that could be
the good thing is you spent $2 on that.
Exactly.
10 CD or DVD collection.
Bingo. There you go.
So that's the thing is, as we mentioned, all of the moves to run it back were going to be in-house. None of these moves are really high risk, high reward. It's low risk, high reward. When you look at Greedy Williams, if it doesn't pan out, they don't need him to start in 2023. Right. But if it does pan out, here's this former potential day one talent coming out of the SEC that was a second round selection. He was a popular pick to the Eagles in 2019, has good length, has good speed. If he develops in Philadelphia, both your corners are over the age of 30. Who knows if they're going to draft a corner this year? There's an opportunity for a guy to have a future. You look at Justin Evans right now. Outside of Reed Blankenship, there's nobody else in this safety room. So you look at Rashaad Penny. I mean, that guy 2 years ago was leading the league in rushing the final 10 weeks of the season. When he's healthy, he's one of the best backs in football. He's not always healthy. Greedy Williams has not been consistent. He's been injured a lot. Justin Evans is not a starter. But again, like you said, Gino, it's, hey, we don't have to spend a lot of money here, and there could be a lot higher return on our investment. So, I think that's your typical Howie Roseman type of offseason. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. With these moves, though, again, it's not really going to make or break you either way.
And I also think it's a testament to Howie and doing things the right way by keeping your in-house talent first, right? I mean, outside of that Rashaad Penny move, they got a lot of those deals done in-house before they went on and even tried to sign the Marcus Mariotas of the world. And we're
Right.
just seeing these Justin Evans moves, and you just see the Nicholas Morrow because they wanted to get their deals done with those guys that they value. And good for Howie Roseman knowing that middle ground. This was a big middle ground offseason for me, Lou, when it came to Howie Roseman, because you had to keep Eagles. You had to keep guys that performed at a high level. But you also, with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, you're looking at him and Javon Hargrave, you couldn't go out of that bargain bin. You had to stick to the bargain bin. Like, yeah, that new Blu-ray movie looks great, right? But you just can't afford it. You got $5 in your pocket, and that's what happens when you go back home and you have a 100-inch TV with all the surround sound, 3D glasses, which is your entertainment center, which is Jalen Hurts. Like, you're not going to be able to afford these big box movies. You're going to have to take a dip in the bargain bin. And at the end of the day, low risk, high reward, because if you do, let's say, hit the Rashaad Penny pick out of the park and Greedy even becomes a serviceable player, like, heck, maybe you have your fourth cornerback that is your number one guy off the bench, and Zach McPherson doesn't work out, and maybe Greedy wants to play special teams. You never know what you can get in these value signings, because they're going to have to come in and know that they signed this deal because there really wasn't a market for them, and they have to cash in on their opportunity. This is a contract year for all of those guys simply because they only have 1 year on that thing. It's not even going to be a full 12 months in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think the one move of all of those that is the most make or break is Rashaad Penny, because I know we saw Bijan Robinson visited Philadelphia, but I don't think the Eagles are going to draft a running back within the first 2 rounds. Maybe they take a guy in round 3. Maybe they trade up for somebody and he's a bigger part of that rotation than like a 7th round pick would be, Gino. But I feel like Rashaad Penny, again, they have Kenny G, they have Boston Scott, they have an elite offensive line in Jalen Hurts. Is he truly make or break? No. But of all of these players they signed, he's expected to be the one lead guy, right? I mean, he's expected right now heading in to be the starter, even over Kenneth Gainwell. His talent, his effectiveness when he's on the field, a lot of times it's better than Miles Sanders. So I think the most pressure comes with Penny. And of course, he's the one of all these guys that gets injured the most.
Do any of these moves, and I keep referencing the Mike Wallace move in 2018 where Torrey Smith leaves, and it's like, okay, that was a big need and something that really helped that offense, and they went and got Mike Wallace to fill that role. And do any of these really seem like that? Because to me, I don't think so, because at running back, it's like,
you could kind of say Penny, but Penny's young. That's the thing.
Yeah, and you still have Kenny Gainwell, who I'm very high on. The Eagles are very high on. Boston Scott, could be a 1B any day of the week. Yeah. It's not like any of these guys are tasked with being the end-all, be-all replacement. We'll see what happens at safety at the end of the day. If that is the case, and we're talking about this in 2024, saying, how on earth did Justin Evans start 17 games plus playoff games for the Philadelphia Eagles?
I hope that's
the worst case scenario, Lou. We have to hope that right now that they have bigger plans in store. And from 3 very well-respected Eagles beat writers that all tweeted within a couple minutes of each other, that being John Clark, Zach Berman, and Dave Zingaro, all yesterday after Justin Evans was signed, saying that something else is going to happen at safety. It might just be a blatantly obvious statement, but those guys just don't say things to say things, especially Zach Berman or Zingaro. I mean, Clark is around the media a lot more, but they have to have something in mind. There's too much out there with the Byards of the world. What's the cost on Jeremy Chin? There's still Adrian Amos out there if you want to go get them. Taylor Rapp. Something has to happen. But right now, for what you have, just keeping your feet in place, being where you are, with what they brought in, I think they have exceeded what I thought they would do in terms of numbers bringing guys in. But at those positions, I think they hit it right on the head. I mean, you knew you were going to have to get a backup quarterback. You knew you're probably going to have to add a running back, one safety of sorts, potentially adding another corner. Maybe corner was the one that took me off guard a little bit, but outside of that, man, I think what they've done so far,
Yeah.
you're not going to get mad when you're spending less than like $5 million
Right.
outside of Marcus. But
And you mentioned Mariota. I know he's the most expensive here, but I think he's an upgrade over Gardner Minshew, and removing the nostalgia part of it, I really am excited about that move. Again, you never want to lose your starting quarterback, but if Jalen Hurts were to go down and you needed Marcus Mariota to play meaningful games, I'm pretty confident that with the offensive line he has in front of him, the playbook, I think, fits his strengths a lot. You look at the weapons that he'd have around him. I'm very confident in the Eagles QB2, more than I've been, honestly, since Nick Foles was here. So I think Howie Roseman did a good job. Again, none of these are super sexy picks, but some of them could be very important. You never know who's going to step up, Gino. I mean, look at 2017 through 2020 and look at all of the random Eagles. Cravon LeBlanc is now a household name for diehard Eagles fans, and Corey Clement in the Super Bowl. So you truly never know, and we'll see what these guys do in 2023. But the job's not done. You mentioned safety. There's work to be done there. They signed a linebacker today, but still need a lot of work at wide receiver, tight end. We'll talk about some potential still free agent moves they could make later on this offseason. Coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
Before we finish up this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles, this episode is brought to you by our friends over at Built Bar. The Built March Madness bracket is here. We know you have a favorite bar or puff, and now's your time to make it count. Go to builtmarchmadness.com to vote for your favorites. I'll be voting for the peanut butter brownie puff, and if you want to support the Eagles to win, you'll be voting for that bar too. Support your team, support your bar or puff. And when you vote, I still can't believe this. Every time I read it, it just shocks the heck out of me. When you just put in a vote, 50 people will be selected to get a free box of Built Bar. Not only that, one lucky fan will get a 12-month subscription to have Built Bar delivered once every single month to your door. If you don't want to get it at Built.com, go to Sam's Club, go to Walmart. You got to try Built Bar, the best protein bar. I was in our coach's football office the other day. I walked by, I see a glimmer of a salted caramel out of my eye, saw the Built Bar logo, picked that thing up, ate it on the way home. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, it's 100% real chocolate, doesn't taste like chalk, and you could get it in stores or online. Run to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you are there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pick.
All right, Eagles fans, we are wrapping up, our Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles, March 21st. The Eagles signed Nicholas Morrow today, the starting linebacker for the Chicago Bears. To really round out the show, Gino, I feel like we got to get into still the job that could be done in free agency. Of course, now the biggest moves that are going to come, like who's going to be that next big safety, who's going to start, long-term at right guard, I would say the defensive tackle spot still, maybe still linebacker, who's wide receiver 3. Most of those answers will probably come during the draft and after, but I feel like there are still a lot of names out there that the Eagles could bring in. Like you mentioned, it's safety. I mean, Kevin Byard, you look at Adrian Amos is on the open market still. We both liked Taylor Rapp in the draft process a few years ago. I think it's safety especially. There's still some moves to be made.
You have to look at what they did with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson last year and say until the middle of August or even the week before the season starts that they could have a move in store at that position. And would I like it to be Adrian Amos? I still think he has a lot of good to play in his game. They just happened to luck into getting Darnell Savage, who's one of the better safeties in the National Football League. And you look at Taylor Rapp. I mean, the Rams, they are completely rebuilding at this point in time. It is evident. Taylor Rapp's a good football player. They just weren't going to sign him. Why not? I mean, these guys are a week or so plus into the market. There clearly isn't that big deal left to be out there, right, Lou? We're in the second, third wave when it's dying down. We know that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson got $6.5 million guaranteed. What are these guys going to cost? Like, what is Kevin Byard going to cost the Eagles, who got AJ Brown for like a couple bags of chips, look back on it, it's like, was it really that much to get him? No, not at all. And there are moves to be made. I'm really intrigued at wide receiver, because like
That's where I was going to go. Yeah, there's a lot of names still out there, man.
Mecole is still out. Like, what if he just wants a 1-year deal, dude? Like, come here and play for a year. I mean, I sign up for that all day, every day.
I'm all in on that because he's just like Quez Watkins, where he has that blazing 4.3 speed. He's a guy you can use in the reverse game, the screens, pre-snap motion, a way better returner than Quez Watkins is too. Outside of last year too, he was healthy. He even tweeted himself. He's like, everybody's calling me injury prone now, but I played in every game outside of last year. So as a rotational guy, as a 3A, 3B with Quez, I know you were all in on Mecole in 2019 during that draft process. Yeah, I mean, I think he would fit right in as that fourth option in this passing game because he's not a volume receiver, right? He's not going to be your 1 or 2 or even your full-time slot. But with the way him and Quez could feed off each other, I like that a lot. So I think Mecole Hardman would probably be the number one option. But even, there's some other guys too. Of course, I've mentioned the Nelson Aguilar reunion before. I don't think that's going to happen. But you look at a guy like Marvin Jones is still out there, a veteran that's a different style of receiver compared to a Quez Watkins. So, Gino, there are definitely some options at receiver. And I know Zach Pascal's gone, but I kind of like that, honestly, because it gives them an opportunity to upgrade that spot and do better with pushing Quez. Because I liked Pascal last year. Sirianni loved him. But as a full receiver, I think there's a higher ceiling you could find, even with the free agents that are still available.
Here's one for you, and I think this guy would be a nice one to have a reunion with. I think the Eagles got rid of him maybe a year too early. What about DeAndre Carter?
Ooh.
Former Charger.
Yeah.
Big upside when it comes to return. He was a reliable weapon for Justin Herbert for a large majority of that season when Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were out. It was Guyton and it was DeAndre Carter. Those two guys really had to run the ship for him. And
I feel like he's like Raheem Mostert, Gino, where he became a really good player after going to the Eagles. Would have been a stud. Yeah, he left the Eagles, and we didn't really know who he was. And then he becomes a good player elsewhere. You're like, wait, that guy was an Eagle? I feel like that's kind of DeAndre Carter at a lower level.
Yeah, he's still 30 years old. I'm not saying that they have to bring in a young guy or an older guy. I mean, Pascal was, he was 28 when they brought him in last year, if I'm not mistaken. And Carter's 2 years older. It doesn't keep you away from potentially drafting another wide receiver as well, adding a bunch of those guys in the UDFA pool. It's just really, what do the Eagles want? Like, what is that third player going to be tasked to do? Is it going to be what Quez was asked to be and it didn't come to fruition, and being that field stretcher, somebody that has good hands in that deep third area? Because if it comes to that, there are a ton of guys in the draft, but at the same time, there's a bunch of guys that you could add to your room right now that are veterans that would be an upgrade over Quez, would definitely be an upgrade over Zach Pascal. Yeah, Zach was good, but we knew what he was. He was the Riley Cooper version for Nick Sirianni to what Chip Kelly had Riley Cooper do. He blocks well. Remember that quote, Lou? He blocks well. When you talk about how a wide receiver blocks,
that's like
motor
not be the guy for you. For me, exactly, if that's the first thing you say, I'm like, ooh, so he can't catch.
Yeah, Pascal. Yeah, I mean, they didn't really have a guy past those top two that was a reliable third threat, and that's another margin move. And I think there's margin moves to be made all over the board. I still think there are guys out there on the defensive line. I still like the idea of bringing Poona Ford in here to reunite with Sean Desai. Sure. I think that would be a smart one. I mean, Shaquille Griffin, like, what's he doing on the sidelines? He was in Jacksonville. He was with Seattle before when Desai was there for a little bit. I mean, I know they have a logjam there, but you don't know what the future is going to be at cornerback in the next 2 years. And that's what makes this next 2 months or so super interesting, because after the draft happens, there will probably be another influx of veteran guys that they sign. It's like, which way do they want to go? Do they want to just continue to get young and know what that 2024 draft is going to be? Or are they just willing to take shots on anybody who presents any upside at all? And I think that's the way Howie Roseman's going to do it, because you've seen the Cravon LeBlancs come and go, the Corey Clemens come and go. Just find the guys at the height of their career, maybe for a year or two, and figure it out past then. Because if you look at 2017, Lou, how many of those guys are still even here? I mean, we're less than a decade removed.
It'll be interesting to continue to follow this. Free agency continues. We got the draft, and as crazy as it sounds, Gino, in
month,
4.5 weeks. I mean, it's insane. We've only got 4 mock draft Mondays left. already, so it's going to come before you know it. We got you covered here Monday through Friday on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to the show. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Eagles your first listen every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes. From free agency to the draft, salary cap management, and more, join NFL experts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino as they take you through what it's like to build a successful NFL franchise every Monday through Friday. You can find Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes wherever you get Locked On Eagles. Also follow us on Twitter at Locked On Birds, at DiBiase LOE, and at GC24_football. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.